I would like to apologize for wrongly attempting to nudge the proceedings. It's not my place.
Welcome back to...
We have nothing to return to. Even the animals are safer in their homes than we women are. All we have are our dreams. So of course we're dreamers.
When I say disgusting movie, a lot of you probably think of it in the traditional sense of a gross display of bodily fluids, perhaps disgusting sexual acts, especially that of a non-consenting nature, over-the-top classic gore, something that looks bad taste, but in a very visual sense. That is not technically the case today, and I will show you why.
The men would definitely leave with us because they can't survive without us.
Well, not for longer than a day or two.
We have not. I'm really about to show y'all why we need to move out of America. Look at this. They're selling lion chops. They're taking exotic animals and cutting them up and putting them in our local grocery stores. Look, I'm in Safeway. They're putting lion meat in the f***ing grocery stores. Lion meat.
A while ago, I was watching some videos about media while I was cleaning the house. I was actually watching videos about 1408 at first because I really like 1408. But then, as you go, you end up clicking on weirder things, and I found this video, and the title really intrigued me. This is how I found out about women talking. Yes, that is actually the name, not just a joke that people are making about the movie. Yes, it really was nominated for those awards, and yes, it is disgusting. Now, this video made incredibly good points, and some of those points are just things that I am also happening to talk about. I'm not aiming to copy this video. In fact, there's a lot of things that he talks about that I won't, so obviously I think that you should watch this video as well. It's just a very, very good breakdown and talks about the film techniques and propaganda used to make this film in terms of techniques and style. However, I really wanted to talk about it from a female perspective, because I wanted to basically cover how misandrous this is, but also how this viewpoint in this whole toxic feminist sphere is often used to bully women to force them into specific boxes for politics, and my experience with that, but also how, because of this type of thing, there's this whole red pill podcast thing, which is also deeply toxic, and it's just people sort of being punted from one side to the other and not understanding that there's a middle ground, and movies like Women Talking fuel it and make it worse. A combo of all of these things are just me pointing out how disgusting, word of the day, this film really is.
You have been invited here to listen to what we have to say and write it down. Nothing more. Just listen. Freaky.
When you put 120 pounds on the back of a woman, she crumbles like a fucking crouton.
Firstly, a telltale sign that this movie is bad is seen through the critics' score. It seems like when a movie is a woke mess, it really has great scores from the critics and the media, and absolutely abysmal scores from the public. Basically, no one watched this movie either. I mean, I can't blame you. I would have skipped it as well if I don't make videos on this kind of stuff. So that's cool.
All of this just worked. It just works.
Women Talking is a movie about some dumb bitches sitting in a barn with a wimpy cuck keeping meeting minutes, and then they leave. Well, I'm sorry, did you want more of an explanation? Because that's actually the plot. For like 90 minutes! This movie takes place in a town called Patriarchum. I know, subtle. The women grow up being brainwashed and they're not taught how to read or write, so they can't think for themselves. Despite that, they're able to have incredibly eloquent word salad college tier conversations about the nature of victimhood and reference literary concepts that they shouldn't know about because they've never read before.
Please forgive my mother for using the wrong word. It's a sin so outrageous that Salome's taken it upon herself to rectify for the sake of all humanity.
Leaving and fleeing are different words with different meanings.
The crux of the movie comes from when a bunch of dudes had been drugging and raping women and then blaming it on ghosts because they'd knock out the women and the women would be like, oh, it must be a demon, you're right, because they're stupid, because they're not taught how to read and write. But the movie shows them getting taken to prison, and the film says that the men that caught the shitbag rapist men and put them in prison are actually protecting them for going to... what? I'm confused. Why would you send someone to prison to protect them?
Eventually, the attackers were taken to the police in the city for their own protection.
Shut up or I'll bust your face! Destroy it!
So even in the movie's demonization of all men, and let me tell you, it is really all men, like, they specifically use the term men to, like, completely generalize both groups as if they're just singular entities. But even in this demonization of men, there are at least some men that exist that are anti-rape. Enough to put these men in prison. Also, this shit just happens out in the open. So even if all the men do agree with the rapists and don't care, why would they put them in jail? Why wouldn't the men just be like, oh look, Jimmy is raping again, and they just leave it because it's clearly happening in daylight? I don't get this. If everyone everywhere were like this in this village, which is clearly their intention because they're trying to set up everyone to be like a metaphor stand-in for the entire world, they don't use names like at all besides like one guy. I think Cuckboy has a name.
Fighting and under that write prose.
Who will go first?
Besides that, it's like everyone is supposed to be a stand-in. So even in this world, there are clearly evil people, but then other people who are like, wow, that's fucked up, and then they put the evil people in jail. This scenario that they're trying to go for only works if the other men in the other areas are anti-bad things too, because, like, otherwise where would they be going? Everywhere in the world is like this. Like, what? It's almost like people in general as individuals are typically anti-bad things. I don't know, man. It doesn't seem like a gender thing.
It's always the quiet ones, but I am going to deliver howls of justice at them through the jowls of my fist. Society, I have you surrounded. Turn yourselves in. You've been abusing this boy, and it ends here.
Who abused him? Who abused the boy?
All of you, collectively, society, give up while you still can.
And I also kind of get, like, through the world building, I kind of get this idea that they're trying to escape because they've realized that the women in other areas are, like, men's equals and are educated. So it's like, not all men are the problem then, it's just the weird ones that you have in this town. So why are you saying that the entirety of men is the problem when clearly that's not the case? Because who is arresting the I don't know, man. I'm already confused. I guess no man has ever cared about his mum or his wife or his sisters or his cousins or his aunties. Men just don't care. You know, literally anytime a man goes apeshit at someone for attacking or preying on his child, especially his daughter, right? Yeah, me neither, never seen that before. But immediately my big issue is that these women talk about all men as faceless monsters that provide nothing to society, and the film agrees with this in real life too. Yet for any injustice, any sort of arrests or protection, there must be at least a few men who want to do what's right and hate the rapists. But they're also given the treatment where they're like faceless monsters.
What if the men refuse to meet our demands? We know that we've been attacked by men, not by ghosts. We know that we are bruised and infected and pregnant and terrified and insane and—
Like, even to protect the men by sending them off. Who are they being protected from? Other men who hate rapists? Because all of the women in this show have not been taught how to fight or defend themselves. They can't take on any of the men because they're not as strong as the men. So they're not going to go around attacking the rapists. Who is attacking the rapists? Surely it's other men who want to attack the rapists. Like how in real life, if a guy puts his hand on a woman, then the other guys in the area are going to be like, holy shit, I must defend the woman, and then they'll go in and beat the guy's ass. So is that what they're protecting the men from? Other men who don't like rapists? So the premise are that these men are being arrested, and the other men doing the arresting for some reason need to go to the village for a couple hours to do something. Like, all of the men just leave, and the children and the women and then Cuckboy are the only ones that are left. So the women in the area, because they have time, decide to have a secret talk in the barn because they all want to leave town because they hate the men, but they can't read or write, so they enlist the help of Cuckboy, who is considered in the film the only good type of man. And the only good type of feminist man is what you typically see in a male feminist in real life, being really fucking weak and shady and weird looking. He can't even speak up for himself, he just mumbles.
I could take care of you and your child.
Okay.
That's why I call him Cuckboy. But he's heralded as this ideal male by the thesis of the film and the book that it's based on. This is what they want the men to be, even though I'm looking at this like, if the men of the village are evil and they come back and they see you guys like having a forbidden meeting in the barn, they're not gonna be happy about that. And if they're abusers and they try and hit you, Cuckboy is gonna get beat the fuck up because he can't do anything about that. Anyone with a brain is immediately thinking, how does he protect them? Because if the other men come back, they'll immediately crush him like a soda can because he's weak and he's a cuckboy.
She crumbles like a fucking crouton.
And then they'll go back to abusing the women. Like, the movie does not address this. There's even a point where the women say they'll kill the men. Like, how? Are you gonna send Cuckboy to do it? Are you gonna exclusively do it in their sleep? What if they wake up to try and fight you? Is Cuckboy gonna save you? I don't think he is. I think he looks like he has cried at the sight of a vagina and he will do so again. But he's there. All of the women are also in the Borg, in their own women Borg as well. They're all on the exact same page with the exact same ideas and they don't care about any of their husbands or brothers or anything. They care about the female children, and initially you might think that they care about the male children because they're children. Later on in the movie they openly say that like children that are male are just monsters in disguise and they need to have the monsterness stomped out of them so that they can actually be human beings.
Boys of 13 and 14 be left behind. Why wouldn't they leave with us?
Surely we don't have to be afraid of the boys of this age.
Boys of 13 or 14 are capable of causing great damage to girls and women. Physical exuberance, intense curiosity, that often results in injury.
And you think that I'm exaggerating this, but they genuinely call, like, think of, if you have like a child who's a boy, think of your son, and think of like these adult women genuinely saying that that boy is a rapist, murderer, and he's a monster, he's not even human, he's not entitled to being called a human. Look at your son, and these harpies are talking about him. I don't even have a son, and I'm angry on behalf of my son. Like, this small tiny little bubble of joy and energy is apparently a disgusting monster who is capable of rape and must be eliminated, or he must suffer to atone for the sins of being what he is. His happiness is the bane of the female suffering, and he must sacrifice himself to prove himself. What the fuck is this? Isn't that awful? Imagine looking at a child and saying this, but this already happens in real life when activists take over classrooms. And it happens to any sort of person, just depending on what the activist is feeling like, what they're thinking of that needs to be dehumanized, because activists are fucking shitheads. So Cuckboy asks the women to talk one at a time, because he's having a hard time writing their minutes for them. And obviously this is important because if you need a record of something, you need to be able to hear what people are saying to write it down. In response to this, they all fucking scream at him for daring to do his job that they asked him to do.
August, please, pros for leaving. Pros for leaving.
The cons of leaving.
We the women will decide what happens in these. Just listen.
May I request that you take it in turns speaking so that I can understand what each of you is saying? Sorry.
Will you just write it down? Under pros.
If he stayed quiet and wrote down all of the stuff that he tried to write but he couldn't hear anything because you were squawking too much, then you'd also be mad at him because he didn't do a good job. So what is he supposed to do? He's the only one that can write, so shut your bitch ass up. You got a sewage problem with that shit that comes out of your goddamn butthole looking ass mouth. The one thing that you got correct in your life is that you know where the barn animals go and put yourself there accordingly. Oy vey. Even when he tried to apologize, they're like, OMG, you think you could just say sorry? OMG, you're so taught that, blah, 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 blah. I don't even feel sympathy for Cuckboy because he chose this, but I'm still annoyed. He also condemns all young children who are male because he wants them to be brainwashed to grow up to be just like him. He's giving these like abusive people advice and enabling them to brainwash male children in this abusive type of way. It's a bit like grooming.
It is possible the men in prison are not guilty of the attacks, but are they guilty of not stopping the attacks? Are they guilty of knowing about the attacks and doing nothing?
But this is basically the movie. Men don't have faces or names, they're like a demonic entity that's just man, and all of them are the same, even the children, besides Cuckboy, of course, he's special. But all of the conventions are like in collectives. There's not even any names for the women themselves, they just call themselves us women, us young people. Like it's like a bad college paper on women in society. It's as subtle as a hammer. But the fact that you can't see the men's faces means they're disposable and unimportant. This is also how, like, war in general works, or action movies. You get, even if you have, like, these stupid, like, oh, women protagonists taking down all the men are just, like, mannequins. They don't have faces. It's a bit like the faces that you see on men are like, they're not even individual, so you can just replace them with anything. It reminds me a bit, have you played Spec Ops the Line, and how Walker starts hallucinating that when he shoots innocent people, he starts seeing the faces of the people that he, like, hates, and then he gets, like, so angry that he starts pummeling the face of the real person that he just killed, so it's like their face looks like pulp anyway, so he can still see his delusion over the top, and that's how it gets him to become more violent over time, to the point where he's just, like, shooting everywhere to try and kill as many people as possible. It's like the same kind of thing where all of these men in these movies are typically seen as being faceless because they're disposable soldiers, and then, like, the women will, like, complain and act like every single man has always been given individuality over women, when in reality everyone gets shit in Hollywood. That's just the way that it is. This is so insulting. In this movie, I'm gonna call them Schrodinger's man. And you've heard me use this term if you've watched my videos before, like Schrodinger's whatever. In Batwoman, I called them Schrodinger's bigot, because essentially in these kind of propaganda films, the thing that is bad takes on the qualities that it needs to for the point of the film at the time, even if it doesn't make any sense and completely contradicts itself. What I mean by that is, in this case, the men are super powerful, they're very strong, they're very oppressive, they keep the women like cattle and they keep them in cages when the movie demands it. But apparently, even though these men are like very devious and capable of doing these things, they're also incredibly dumb and weak when the women are able to do things to like get away from them, or like be like, oh, I'm better than you, or something like that. The men are suddenly lowered in every way to make up for this woman who's doing this stuff. So it's like they're sometimes a threat, sometimes they're an annoyance. But at the end of the day, the only gender is female in this film, and the second entity are things that obstruct a female. Male as a gender isn't even deserving in and of itself, and it doesn't get individuality. That's basically how this movie is constructed. Men are all background noise to women suffering, even the male children.
Is forgiveness that's forced upon us true forgiveness? Perhaps we need to understand more what it is we're fighting to achieve, not only what we're fighting to destroy.
These bitches can't read, but they speak like they've read more than the men. How do you have the concept of freedom or the self if you can't even read? Language control is one of the most important steps for totalitarianism. Everything dystopian has language control in it, where they have like illiterate people or words that are banned, and then the like newer generations don't even know that those words exist, and they can't voice their opinions because they don't have the concept to say so. All of these cows keep saying, us women, the men, us women. I go up to my friends and say, hey, us fellow young people, all the time, you know. Does no one have names in this town? I mean, you guys all know each other, right? At one point they even shift to saying that all the men who didn't stop the rapists are just as guilty, even though they eventually did, didn't they?
It is possible the men in prison are not guilty of the attacks, but are they guilty of not stopping the attacks? Are they guilty of knowing about the attacks and doing nothing?
Even the children, I guess. The men did catch and stop the rapists. That's why they're going to jail. What about you guys? Did you all collectively find out about the rapes at the same time? Not one of you had like an inkling of what was going on and like didn't tell the other ones? What if one of you knew that the rapes were occurring and didn't tell the other women? Like how females and males in Hollywood know about the rapes that occurred but didn't say anything until it comes out publicly, and then all of a sudden they only just found out and they're appalled by it. They all decide that all the men are guilty because the men built the colony, which leads to rapes happening, so men cause the rapes. This is the actual logic that they have in this film.
We do know that the conditions have been created by men and that these attacks have been made possible because of the circumstances of the colony. And those circumstances have been created and ordained by the men.
But wait, aren't you suggesting that the attackers are as much—
Shut up or I'll bust your face!
But their idea is that they need to make their own colony so that the rapes don't occur, because they think that a woman-built colony will ensure the safety of women. But my question is, what if they do happen? What if the rapes do happen? In that case, do you blame all women because the women enabled this to happen by constructing the colony in such a manner? What if a woman rapes another woman? Does that mean that all women are at fault here? Besides the victim, I'm confused.
And they have taught the lesson of power to the boys and men of the colony, and the boys and men have been excellent students.
Oh, right, no, none of that's real because of the lesson of power. What the fuck does that mean? What is that? Is it like a granola bar I can have?
Cutting them up and putting them in our local grocery stores. Look, I'm in Safeway. They're putting lion meat.
But it implies that every single man has so much power in society, when that's obviously not true, and these girls are so on about it. Yeah, I'm sure like a homeless dude has just the same amount of power as some evil chauvinist rapist CEO. There's even arguments in real life. Nothing in the real world is built for women. I found this thread on Twitter that is like, the air conditioning is sexist. These people are real. Cars are inaccessible to females, the temperature, the clothing, the nature of reality itself. This reminds me of the other side of this clown show as well. There are those really bad, super fake and toxic red pill podcasts. Like, they either invite super ditzy bitches, like dumb bitches on, that are whores, just to get like the really easy low-hanging fruit argument of whore bad, to make themselves look good, when like everyone knows these girls are dumb bitches, everyone knows whore bad, but they just say it anyway because it's kind of the thing, and then they can cut it into tiny little clips and spread it all around social media. Or they get like genuinely misogynist women on the show and then say abhorrent things. Just sit back and they're like, well the woman's the one who said it, the woman's the one who agreeing with it, so I'm not sexist because like she said it, you know what I mean? Like how in this movie they make Cuckboy have these specific lines where he sells out other men and boys and says that boys need to be like brainwashed to stop being rapists. That whole disgusting thing that I just talked about. It's the same sort of thing with like the red pill podcasts will get these women who say the most abhorrent shit ever, and then the guys will just sit back and be like, no, but like she said it, she's the woman, she said it, so it's okay, right? You can't call me sexist. Like this stupid bitch Pearl what's-her-face, I see her so often and she always says the most abhorrent shit. I remember seeing her on this debate with Sydney Watson, and with Sydney, she was saying stuff that was actually reasonable, and I was like, hey, this woman kind of sounds pretty smart. And then you actually look at the stuff that she says on her own, in her own podcasts and in her own videos, and you're like, who the fuck is this crazy bitch, you know what I mean? Things that she has said that women should not vote. Women should stick with and endure abusive partners because 1, she thinks that it's their fault for getting in that situation, and 2, that it's just something that they have to do rather than getting divorced. Like, so all these stories that you hear, nightmare scenarios, maybe even a woman in your life that you know, or a man in your life that you know, but I'm specifically saying women because Pearl hates women, like she, you know, getting beat up so hard that she thought that she was gonna die. She's bleeding, she's swollen, she doesn't even feel like herself anymore because she's so bruised that she can't recognize herself. Pearl will look that person in the eye and say, well, you should stay with him because you deserve it. Not only that, but she also has this weird pedophilic fixation on 16-year-olds.
16-year-old chicks are hotter than 26-year-old chicks. Whoa. Leave marriage for the people that actually believe in, for better or for worse, for richer or for poor.
The sanctity of marriage also rely on the woman being a virgin, so you wouldn't be able to get married.
What do you mean?
Well, you've spoken quite openly about how you're not a virgin.
16-year-old girls being like sexualized by older men. I don't know why she thinks that. It makes me think that maybe has she been through something when she was younger that has warped her perception of teenage girls and sexuality because of what she's been through and she hasn't dealt with it in a healthy manner. I'm not sure, but in like conjunction with that, it's just such a disgusting thing to say. And then it's frustrating because like as a woman who is stepped away from feminism, who does not like it, who thinks that it's like, you know, insidious and like I don't like it, the feminists who wrote Women Talking, for example, can look at me and then say, you are like this caricature of misogyny, and then for evidence they can point at Pearl because Pearl's a fucking clown, but she's real, she exists, and any woman who steps away from feminism, these idiots can just point at the other idiots on the other side and be like, that's you. If you're a man who is standing up for your own rights because you saw something like Women Talking and you think it's disgusting, these women can point at the shitheads on those red pill podcasts and be like, that's you, that's what you sound like. It's so stupid. And then if you try and say something against Pearl because she just said that 16-year-olds should be in sexual relationships with adults, and that if you're in an abusive relationship you should stay with them because it's your fault, she can point at the Women Talking feminists and be like, That's you right now. And then all of these people who are like super vulnerable, impressionable people are seeing both sides of this online. Both sides are absolute garbage, but it's like it tries to block you from seeing that there's a middle ground. So young people end up being shucked from one side to the other, not knowing that that's not healthy. And it's just, I wish we could take both of these groups of people and just put them on an island somewhere and make them fight. And then just leave them there until they take care of their own problem, you know what I mean? Delete. Anyway, back to the movie. This one lady admits that since her daughter was sick, she walked for an entire day and a half to get medicine for her, because her husband and the other men are so stupid and evil that they don't want the daughter to get better, so they won't drive her there. No father has ever done anything for his daughter. My dad, being a super cool dad who has always looked out for me and done the best for me, no, definitely not. He's a man, he can't do that. What about the other women who have access to cart riding and all that kind of stuff? Because there are women who are riding carriages later in the film, so you couldn't ask one of them? Did you just take it upon yourself to do that? There's also a trans person in this isolated anti-technology religious community that rejects modernity, and this is fine. The boys just apparently, even though the boys and the men are so hateful in this community, they seem to have no problem taking this woman who identifies as a man in as one of their own. The boys just greet her with smiles and play with her, and it's fine. She even got these male clothes from somewhere without a problem, and she uses them perfectly fine, and the men don't seem to give a shit about her. So it's like they hate women, and they hate the notion of freedom for women, and they're like super sexist, but they're also very trans friendly. I'm not sure how the fuck this works. And then she cries because she isn't getting addressed as a man, even though she clearly is before. Like, I'm confused. Is this implying that the women have not been addressing you as a man, but the men have been? So the women are like transphobic or something? Wouldn't the males force you to dress as a female, and the boys are also monsters too, so that like even if you step out of there in male clothing, they'd be like, yeah, it's the woman, blah blah blah. Like, why are they just hanging out with you? The narrative is also that she was always a dude the entire time because she was a dude trapped in a female body, which like that's a whole thing about gender dysphoria, sure. But my question is to the character in the film. Why are they being so nice to her? Why are they accommodating her for this? If she was always a dude, isn't she an abuser? Because all men are abusers. So why are they being nice to her? Why are they letting her into female spaces? She's a monster who's also an abusive piece of shit like every other man, right? Unless the film is saying that trans men don't have the same masculinity as men, and they shouldn't be counted as like real men. So why is this, and why is the trans man allowed to explore his masculinity if apparently masculinity is all wrong and bad? Anyways, the one lady is pregnant because her little brother and his friends all raped her, and they all show images of children being the perpetrators.
Hello, little brother. I don't know if the baby was yours or if it was one of your friends. I think it was likely yours though, because there was something wrong with it.
And then they do these disgusting close-ups of young children as if they're sex offenders or inhuman, like, demons that have mugshots. They're just sitting in a classroom. The voiceover has scary music playing and is talking about how evil and disgusting these children are. Small children who just want to play and have fun. Their mothers are talking about them like someone talks about cockroaches infesting a house. Also, the big problem with this kind of propaganda is how you don't even need to talk about the argument to show that it doesn't make sense. Like how I was so confused in the beginning of how the premise already doesn't make sense. And it really is just continuing to fall apart the more I talk about it. The best way that you can really show an argument in general is in a way that's approachable for people to come see and understand and invites them to ask questions. For example, I hate The Handmaid's Tale because it makes no sense, it's just in general in the movie. It's set up to just be misery porn for middle-aged women to feel like they're oppressed and imagine this kind of LARP world that makes them get excited. It's also steeped in obsession. Atwood is a fucking weirdo. She once said that we're also trapped by men, that even our own deep thoughts in our own brains are ruled by men, because we're thinking about what the men must think of us for thinking our private thoughts, when this is not true at all. I've never had a really deep session thinking in on myself at 3 a.m. and then going, oh my god, what would the boys think of me for doing this? Like, while I'm lying in bed playing Kirby and listening to bad creepypastas on a cozy Saturday night, I'm just thinking about how absolutely comfy I am. I'm not thinking about what the boys think of me. These feminists, and I would say also like people like Pearl, so like people on both extremes, are so obsessed with men and how men think, and any woman who isn't part of this cult because they've stepped away from that and they don't have issues with male attention, it's inconceivable to these kind of women. Like, for example, in my own experience, if I'm a tomboy, I must be a pick-me girl who wants to be one of the boys for attention. It's not just that I'm a tomboy because I've grown up that way, because my dad has always been super awesome, and I'm the only female cousin in my immediate family, so I naturally just hung out with the boys and the boys' friends. And now as an adult, I'm picking up more feminine things and doing more feminine things, but the core of my personality is still a bit boyish because that's how I grew up. Apparently that's like me being toxic because I'm embracing male standards. However, if you're a super girly girl and you love really cute pink things and making yourself look stunning and beautiful with makeup, it must be because you're wanting boys to find you more attractive. You're not just doing it because it's your own personal care and your own personal thing. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be a girly girl or a tomboy or a healthy mix of the two, but they think that everything that you're doing has to be for male attention. You can't just exist and be happy as your own individual and your own woman. The propaganda-obsessed people will say that your lack of suffering for the ideology or imagined suffering is apparently you just giving in to the men. And she hates it. She absolutely hates it, and she wishes that you were suffering just like her. And again, I'm not just talking about the feminists, I'm talking about people like Pearl as well. Apparently she doesn't have a relationship, but she'll say that she knows exactly how they work. She will judge other people's relationships for completely normal things, and then claim that those things are also woke and unhealthy when apparently she doesn't know enough about it to get a relationship herself. Is she herself going to go and find a man who, even if he is abusive, she will stay with him? Or is she expecting other women to do that and she herself does not want to do that? Women who reject the ideology have to do it for some sort of male reason. They can't just do it for their own health, you know?
Burden this sack of stones from one to the next by pushing our pain away. Let's absorb it ourselves. Let's inhale it. Let's digest it.
Shut up or I'll bust your face! Just try it! Stop it!
Two books on female issues that I actually really like are one, The Virgin Suicides, and two, The Stepford Wives. Both books talk about women facing threats and being forced to do things that make them feel trapped and pained, and certain things about womanhood, you know? What drives them to the conclusion in the end as well. But not only do these books not try to blame all men or try to make all women seem like a Borg, it's very individual, but they also leave space for what if this happened to men. It allows you to ask questions because these worlds make sense and they feel real. For example, a male could write a boy version of The Virgin Suicides where these boys are trapped in this horrible isolated family where the father figure is inaccessible and not providing them proper guidance, and the mother is not nurturing them at all, so they feel very lonely and they're not sure how to react with other people outside of this weird bubble that they are forced to live in. It's very approachable. I would definitely read it. I would really enjoy trying to see into problems that men have, and as a woman, as much as I can understand it, in the same way that I think reading The Virgin Suicides would let people have a little glimpse into, like, you know, in these good literature examples, the invitation is to actually explore what gets people to listen to it, what it means. Like, you're invited to actually take part, and if you have an issue, you say the issue. So it has plenty of room, because it doesn't have anything to hide. Like, can you imagine a male version of women talking? Can you imagine how that shit doesn't make any sense? It doesn't make any sense as a female version, and it doesn't make any sense as a male version either. Because even to do so, you would have to demonize all women and girls, even the tiny little babies. And I don't think any man in their right mind could even conceptualize doing that to try and make a male version of this. It also doesn't invite the viewer to engage and look deeper, because the minute that you ask questions to point out how things don't make sense, you're demonized because you clearly, like, want women to be abused or some stupid thing like that, you know?
You have been invited here to listen to what we have to say and write it down. Nothing more.
Anyways, now we get to the point where they ask Cuckboy if they should take the children and the teenagers with them to their utopia when they leave the men behind. He says that it's a complicated question because even a 12-year-old boy is blatantly exposed as violent rapists who will absolutely threaten and kill any female, and you have to pick the younger children so that you can brainwash them to stop being monsters. These horrible people are really saying that young boys should be punished as horrific monsters just by the fact that they are male. They legitimately act like boys are inherently disgusting monsters and need to be harshly controlled and changed until they become like Cuckboy when they're older. Cause fuck their happiness, right? Cuckboy even just sells out these young boys by saying how horrible they are. You have condemned children because of how pathetic you are. You have condemned them to non-human status and suffering. Cuckboy, you are disgusting. They basically also just show the boys as dogs or bulls, running around and being menacing. They're not humans. Even the women are saying that the boys are monsters and their sons are monsters. Their sons are monsters. Cuckboy then decides to try and get laid, but the girl that he's after says, if I were married, I wouldn't be myself.
If I were married, I wouldn't be myself. So the person you love would be gone.
You might think that this is just like an individual response that she's saying that she herself does not want to commit to a marriage yet because she needs to explore herself. That is not the case. This is a very, very common feminist talking point that marriage is going to change you and love itself and settling down means that it is not true feminism. Your true self and your true woman essence come from being alone and suffering. You can't love, you can't be happy with someone. You must remind yourself of your suffering and constantly affirm the suffering as that's how you're supposed to exist. So if you love someone and you got married, you'd no longer be your true self because you're, actually happy with someone and embracing human companionship. This is a trend. I remember in university I had to read My Brilliant Career by What's-Her-Face for an assignment, and at the end of that book she rejects the dude that she fell for because she said that she wouldn't really be herself if she was in love, so she chose to reject his marriage and be miserable and suffer in the end. Fuck that guy's feelings too, I guess. But this has always been a feminist goal. Just how with something like with Pearl, it's completely overcorrected where she says that you must get married immediately, and if you get married to the wrong person and then he starts beating you up to a bloody pulp, well, that's just the way it is, lol. Something about marriage breaks these people's brains, you know what I mean?
The men would definitely leave with us because they can't survive without us.
Well, not for longer than a day or two.
We have not.
Well, what happens when they show up? Cuckboy can't do shit, he certainly can't throw a fist, can he? Are you gonna beat up the big muscly men like you're one of those Batwoman characters? Or are you just gonna let them drag you back to Patriotopia or whatever this thing was called? Are you gonna shoot them? Do you even know how to use a gun? Do you like guns? Is me talking about guns for defense gonna trigger them and because guns are bad? Are you gonna leave the trans person behind because he's a man and he needs to be with the other men? Or do you think because he's a good man, he and Cuckboy need to go with you? Fat Girl has a panic attack because she's been abused, but it's just another way for the writers to point at the screen and go, look at the bad thing that's happening right now. And if you don't like this movie, then you're saying that you agree with the bad thing. It's like when you're in school and someone puts on those bullying PSAs and they're really bad and their acting is awful, but if you make fun of them, then some bitch in class is gonna be like, this movie is talking about how bullying is bad, so are you saying that you think bullying is good because you don't like the movie? Point out how many times I've said I'm confused because it's gonna keep happening. They add things into the movie. I don't know if it's for brownie points or what, but then they don't address the things that they add into the movie. And then the film, it's like they don't want you to ask more questions about the things that they added into the movie. Then we see this lady telling a story about how she was riding a horse carriage one day. And I'm just asking again, why didn't anyone help that one bitch who wanted to walk to get her daughter some Pepto-Bismol from across the way earlier? It seemed like a life or death situation, right? So the women spot a man arriving back to town and they decide that now is the time to leave. How do any of these women get packed in time to leave it tomorrow? Have you traveled with women? It takes longer time to get packed. How do they do any of this without the males seeing this and doing something about it because they're evil? Because if you suddenly see a bunch of women suddenly packing and acting weird and conspiring together, and you're a disgusting captor, you're gonna ask if they're gonna escape and you're gonna try and do something about it, right? Wouldn't there just be a lot of men trying to lock their women away? They're awfully placid for a bunch of evil men, don't you think? and they just let them walk away with their sons and daughters and sisters and wives, especially Cuckboy. But that's really how the movie ends. After all of this crap about how they're suffering and they're prisoners and even barn animals are safer in their barns than women are in their own homes, they're just allowed to walk away. And all of the stipulations that they have, it's fine. The men don't have a problem. They're so evil that they change traits to remain the most evil in any given situation. At first, they want their women in cages as trophies, but they're also so evil that they don't care about losing their own family members, so they just let them walk away. Unless they're letting them go so that they can enact revenge later in some sort of weird thing. Follow them when they don't expect it. Who's gonna protect you, Cuckboy? Whatever. Something that I purposefully did not mention until the very end is that this movie and book tells you that it's based on a true story. Is not actually the case. It is the true story is used as a clutch. And I specifically avoided this because I wanted to judge the movie on its own as a shitbag movie and then roast it for being immoral and using real life rape stories as propaganda. The real case was a group of Mennonite women in a town of about 25,000 people. Out of 25,000 people, there was 9 people in a gang rape gang who would go after women. These 9 evil people, they were caught, they were arrested, they are hated, they are maligned, they are jailed. Everyone hates them. There are still bars put on the windows of houses to this day because the people of the community want to protect their women, because what happened was abhorrent and those 9 people were responsible because those 9 individuals are evil. That's it. However, this book and movie used real rape victim stories as excuses to push propaganda, and these communities don't use technology, so these women won't know that this is what's happening to their stories. These disgusting people knew that these real rape victims would not have any idea that their stories are being used for cheap propaganda, and wouldn't be able to talk back to them and tell them not to do it or denounce it. These rape victims wouldn't be able to say that they don't agree. So they unknowingly go about their lives not knowing that their horrific trauma is being used selfishly by a bunch of rich feminists for a LARP. And the men who beat themselves up in real life over this, the men who are like, I failed to protect my wives and my daughters, who genuinely feel that way because they would feel guilt for having that happen. And these demons will take this story and then say, yes, it was your fault, and cast these men as horrible people who wanted their wives to be raped. I actually have no words for this, how awful it is. But that's the story. This movie won awards. This is why I don't pay attention to any award shows. I don't pay attention to the Grammys, I don't pay attention to the TV one, the Oscars, whatever it is. I don't pay attention to them because this is the kind of stuff that they push. Anyway, the next video that I'm doing is about Kirby. So I'm gonna lighten things up a lot by talking about that. I'm gonna try and pepper in something nice between every like harrowing depression video just for the sake of it. Yeah.